Back in 2013, Lydia and I embarked on our first proper adventure together to Iceland. We got talking to these two middle-aged women, basically Lydia and I in the future. We never caught their names, however we did catch their favourite country.
Bosnia.
And so here we are, almost 4 years later.
I didn't really know what to expect because Bosnia is not really written about.
It doesn't even have a lonely planet. Everywhere's got a lonely planet. Even Saudi Arabia's probably got a lonely planet. And I know for a fact they don't have any decent pubs.
With this in mind, we decided to combine Croatia into our itinerary, just in case Bosnia was proper shit.
We had a lot of things in our itinerary, so we needed to hire a car.
We're en route to Sarajevo, baby! Yeah! Sarajevo is Bosnia's capital city. Nestled compactly in a valley in the middle of the Dinaric Alps, the city boasts mountainous views and the most ethnically diverse and intertwined Muslim and Christian architecture that I have ever come across in any European city. Walking around it bears a striking resemblance to Turkey, particularly the cultural hub, Başakşehir, that is alive with the sound of chatter, prayer, and the clanging of knives and forks.
It's really hard to be a vegetarian in Eastern Europe, but it was definitely doable.
And at the end of the day, there's always beer.
A meal you can always rely on to be veggie friendly is breakfast, which we had before heading out to educate ourselves on Bosnia's tragic past.
I learned a lot about the war while I was in Bosnia, more so than I did ever know before.
The war in Bosnia took place between 1992 and 1995, following the breakup of Yugoslavia, which saw Bosnia attacked by the Serbs, which resulted in the rape and death of over 100,000 civilians.
There's still bullet holes everywhere in the buildings. There are buildings that are basically just rubble. It's quite sad, really. But it also showed me just how well a country can build itself back up.
I mean, the headroom's not ideal.
We learned very early on that Bosnian roads were going to prove to be a bit of a challenge.
Just done the hardest bit of driving I've ever done in my life. The car wouldn't even go up in first gear.
The car smelt like fire. The rocks were scraping underneath the car.
Mummy! I have tears. If we die, whoever's watching this,
we're not going to die, we just won't get our deposit back for the car.
Mutually agreeing that the pavement was going to be a better option for the evening, we parked the car and made our way to the Yellow Bastion, a small cannon fortress offering Coca-Cola and panoramic views of Sarajevo.
The first beautiful thing you notice about Bosnia when you arrive are its spectacular sunsets.
Unless you arrive in the morning.
Then you might find something else if you arrive in the morning.
Our next destination was to be Mostar, but before heading there we decided to go on an elaborate detour to two small towns, called Jahzzar and Travnik, which we heard were home to an impressive waterfall and fortress.
So here we are in an old fortress in Travnik. Now we haven't been given any information about this place, but I can probably tell you that it's pretty old.
I've got the job.
After a scenic day spent majoritively in the car, it was nice to finally stretch our legs in Mostar.
My favourite Stari Grad, which translates as Old Town, was probably Mostar.
I really liked Mostar. It was like a massive deja vu of all of those fairy tales that you used to indulge in when you were younger. But it also had a pub, so yeah, that was a bit of a bonus.
The enchanting city of Mostar is home to perhaps the most famous bridge in the Balkans. Built by the Turks in 1566 and then rebuilt again in 2004 after it was destroyed in the 93 war. It angers me to think that people could destroy such a thing of beauty. If walking around the city isn't enough, Mostar also boasts easy access to sites outside of its surrounding area. 12 kilometres south of the city is home to Blagai.
What is Blagai?
It's an old house that was built in the 1500s. It's a religious site.
Also known as the Dervish House, the spiritual monastery lies unspoiled under a striking cliff overhang.
2 words. Airbnb. Missed opportunity.
Exploitative sarcasm aside, Lydia and I drove ourselves and our new friends a further 50 kilometres to our next destination.
So we've arrived in Plitvice Falls, perhaps the closest to utopia I have ever seen, except for of course all the screaming kids.
It was soon time to bid a fond farewell to Bosnia and cross the border into Croatia.
Croatia was a massive shock because I think we'd already experienced how cheap Bosnia was when we entered Croatia. I had a breakdown.
Renowned for being cheap, Lydia and I got quite the shock when we arrived in Dubrovnik, recently made more famous by Game of Thrones and subsequently a lot more expensive than we were expecting. But it was hard to stay mad at the orange pearl of the Adriatic.
So we have just touched down in Dubrovnik and I'm sorry, I don't think I've ever stayed in a better place with a better view. Look at this. I think it's about time I watch Game of Thrones. So here we are, sweating our asses off on the city walls. My face redder than the day I was born. Dubrovnik, very expensive but beautiful place. I'm gutted to leave, wish we had more time here. Wish we did more, but what was the weather yesterday, Lydia? Hot. We was melting. We are just driving to Split right now. My sides are splitting with excitement.
And last night left me with a splitting headache.
Oh my God, we got a croissant, right? Because I'm willing to split that with you.
Just like our puns, our time in Split was limited, but we did manage to squeeze in a little bit of sightseeing, including a climb up the bell tower of the Cathedral of St. Domnius, built at the turn of the 7th century and regarded as the oldest Catholic cathedral in the world that remains intact. Croatia is growing in popularity as one of Europe's best party destinations, and in particular there's a small island which a popular British tabloid just named the Magaluf of the Adriatic. Me and Lyd had to check it out for ourselves.
We left the car in Split, felt quite liberated really, just a backpack and off we went.
So we've just touched down in Hvar, one of Croatia's #1 tourist destinations along with Dubrovnik, and for good reason. Lyd, I think we're going to like this place.
I was really surprised by how pretty and historic Hvar was. It felt like a little toy town.
It was an amazing little place. Once everyone kind of disperses and you go out and explore, you pretty much have your own little piece of paradise all to yourself,
Where you can burn in peace.
What is it? It's rakia.
It's quite strong.
We're going to see the sunset.
but sunset in Hvar is far from the end of the day.
What was the nightlife like at Hvar? I thought we weren't going to include this.
Let's just say that it involved a lot of vomiting. a lot of vomiting.
It was all going so well until last night. We spent our entire daily budget on one drink, a big drink. We lost the key to our room, and now we've had to wander around Hvar all day dodging people who may have seen Lydia projectile vomit off of the harbour last night. God, we need to get off this island.
And so we did. After possibly one of the worst hangovers of our lives, we got the ferry back to Split and drove 250 kilometres north into the splendour that was Plitvice National Park.
My favourite place was Plitvice National Parks.
Plitvice National Park is a forested area home to 15 crystalline lakes that descend into each other via a series of breathtaking waterfalls. It is consequently one of the most beautiful places I have ever had the privilege of visiting.
The water was just like bright blue. The trees were so green. The roses were so red.
Broad beans asleep in a blanket bed.
No, it was beautiful.
Despite the park being highly protected and well preserved by the authorities, the atmosphere can quickly become spoiled by the overwhelming amount of tourists that come flocking in towards midday. If you don't fancy getting your eyes gouged out by a selfie stick, I'd strongly suggest you arrive at 7 a.m, the park's opening time. 6 hours of hiking and a tin of sweet corn later, we collapsed into the welcoming arms of Falling Lakes Hostel.
My favourite hostel was probably Falling Lakes Hostel in Plitvice.
It was like being at camp, but on a backpacker's budget.
There was just a great atmosphere. The people that were staying there were great. They helped us organise a trip kayaking.
Having spent the whole day kayaking, we'd spent little time planning what to do next, and since our money was cascading like a Plitvice waterfall, we made the executive decision to cross the border into Bihac and spend the evening loitering in a restaurant by the River Una.
We had a free night where we hadn't booked anything. It was a bit too late for that now, and Laura was convinced that we would survive a night wild camping, so I happily obliged.
Laura, there's definitely something over there.
Huh? Yeah, look at the thunderstorm.
No, there's definitely an animal making a noise.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, there's a bear, Lid. I'm not joking, there's a fucking bear over there. No, it's a horse. Or is it a bear? Lid?
I knew that Laura would still be filming, but it also crossed my mind that she was being mauled to death by a bear.
Needless to say, we survived the night.
The next morning we got up, our car was covered in condensation and it smelt like Laura's feet. And we went straight to Zagreb.
Zagreb is Croatia's capital city and easily my favourite destination of our road trip. The city oozes with life and art, a far more alternative vibe compared to the coast. It shows its true character in its selection of buzzing markets, forward-thinking restaurants, and parks that come alive with music and dance at night. It's safe to say, I was in my absolute element.
Zagreb was the coolest place that we visited. Some great museums, some great sights.
4 kilometres from the city centre is Zagreb's Museum of Modern Art. At a whopping 14,600 square metres, you can easily spend half a day indulging in some of the quirky displays by contemporary Croatian artists, as well as some more familiar ones. We then went on to the Museum of Broken Relationships, a museum that was basically a real-life version of a book you'd buy from Urban Outfitters, exhibiting artefacts salvaged from the relationships that never made it to happily ever after. Ending our 2-week road trip on a contemporary city break,
led us to reflect on the nature of our trip as a whole. In 2,000 kilometres, we'd visited war-torn cities with Ottoman architecture, mountains, fortified coastal towns, party islands, national parks. It was hard to believe we'd accomplished so much without even a scratch on the car. Well, maybe just one.
This road trip, all in all, was one of the best ones I've ever been on. Yeah, I've only been on one, but it was a great trip. I really hope that it inspires other people to go and visit these places, because there is literally nowhere else like it. And there's so much to see.